The black holes of nature are the most perfect macroscopic objects there are in the universe. The only elements in their construction are our concepts of space and time.
The Interplanetary Podcast. The exploration of space for the benefit of all mankind. Your hosts here in London, Matthew Russell and Jamie Franklin.
Space.
Matt, who said that?
It was Subrahmanyan Chandrasekhar.
Now that is a name and a half.
We're going to talk about him, Jamie, because it's his birthday on Friday, or today as the podcast comes out, especially considering what happened this week.
I think it's totally worth talking about him. Where do we start, though?
Well, let's start with where he was born, in Lahore, in the Punjab, which at the time was British India, which is now, of course, Pakistan.
They make the best curries, in my opinion.
They're certainly up there.
When I say that, I've never been there, but I have been to a Lahore restaurant in London, and it was incredible.
A lot of curries are very Britishified when you have them over here, but that's not a bad thing. There's some very good British curries.
Very true.
But yes, he died in August 1995 from a sudden heart attack. Was born on 19th of October 1910.
Yes.
Over the last few weeks, we've been having a few nightmares. Just after we recorded the last podcast, we had the Soyuz hiccup.
Yes, it was a hiccup.
But obviously Hubble had gone into safe mode. Kepler's running on fumes, and Chandra Space Telescope had gone into safe mode as well. But luckily that one's completely recovered and it's fine. But of course, Chandra Space Telescope is named after Subrahmanyan Chandrasekhar.
It is.
Chandra being the shortened name. Do you know how it got its name?
No.
NASA had a naming competition for the third of its four great observatories, of which Chandra is one of them, and 6,000 entries, and the name Chandra was chosen. That's how much of a legend Chandra was back in 1979.
Did anyone call it telescope?
This is back in 79, before post-ironic humour was a thing.
Oh, damn it. A much simpler time, Matt.
Yes, it was a simpler time. I was only 8. 20 years later, it flew on Space Shuttle Columbia after it was named. So Chandrasekhar was, in 1930, was offered a scholarship by the Indian government after being rather cool at school, and went to Cambridge University, Trinity College.
Not too shabby.
Not too shabby, where he joined R.H. Fowler, who was impressed by one of his papers that he'd written as an A-level student or a student of that age to get into university. And before it even arrived, on his plane journey over, he was adding relativistic corrections to Fowler's work.
Incredible.
So during his time there, obviously, he really impressed everyone, and he flew around a little bit and hung out with Max Born, hung out with Paul Dirac, hung out with Niels Bohr, the greats of physics. While he was at university, he developed the theoretical model explaining the structure of white dwarfs, which is what he really is famous for. And he took into account this relativistic variation of mass with the variation of velocities of electrons that compose their degenerate matter. Sort of the Jamie Franklin of electrons, aren't they?
Well, if I could tell you all about it, but we just haven't got time today.
Okay, well, I'll just quickly say, so he showed that the mass of a white dwarf could not exceed 1.44 times that of the Sun, the Chandrasekhar limit.
Duh.
So that's his most famous kind of thing, the Chandrasekhar limit. But Sir Arthur Eddington was not impressed. And in an infamous encounter at the Royal Astronomical Society, the RAS, in London in 1935, they had a bit of an argument, and he publicly ridiculed the concept of the Chandrasekhar limit. But subsequently, 40 years later, being proved wrong by computers and the identification of actual real black holes.
I hope he said sorry.
Well, Chandrasekhar, in several interviews, said that he thought that Eddington's behaviour was in part racially motivated, which prompted Chandra to leave the UK for the US in 1937, where he became a faculty member of the Chicago University, or University of Chicago, until his death in 1995.
Oh, okay.
In 1983, he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Physics with William A. Fowler for the theoretical studies of the physical processes of importance to the structure and evolution of the stars. But he was a little bit upset because that was his early work, and he thought it was slightly denigrating of his lifetime's work.
Well, yeah, okay, but it's still a Nobel Prize, mate. Come on.
Yeah, still a Nobel Prize, but I guess maybe he thought Nobel Prizes were a little bit kind of, whatever, because his uncle, C.V. Raman, was also awarded the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1930. So it obviously runs in the family. Brainy family.
It really is.
If you want to talk about stellar structures, white dwarfs, stellar dynamics, stochastic processes, radiative transfer, the quantum theory of hydrogen anion, hydrodynamic and hydromagnetic stability, turbulence, equilibrium, and the stability of ellipsoidal figures of equilibrium, general relativity, mathematical theory of black holes, or the theory of colliding gravitational waves, Chandrasekhar's your man.
Well, Matt, what else is there?
I don't know. I actually don't know.
Seriously.
And in World War II, he was even involved with ballistics and ballistic research. And the Manhattan Project wanted him, but they couldn't get his visa in time. So Oppenheimer was aware of his work.
So, Matt, he did work under the philosophy of systematization. What a scientist tries to do essentially is to select a certain domain, a certain aspect, or a certain detail, and see if that takes its appropriate place in a general scheme which has form and coherence, and, if not, to seek further information which would help him to do that.
The wise words of Chandrasekhar himself.
How do you like them apples?
Do you know what? I absolutely love it. And what's incredible is he really stuck to his guns here. So his unique style was to master several fields of physics. So his working life is divided into distinct periods. So he just basically studied a very specific area, published loads of papers, and then wrote a book summarising the major concepts in that field. So this is what he did. From 1929 to 39, his first decade, he studied stellar structure, Nobel Prize. 1939 to 1943, he focused on stellar dynamics and the theory of Brownian motion. 43 to 50, concentrated on the theory of radiative transfer and the quantum theory of negative ion of hydrogen. 1950 to 1961, sustained work on turbulence and hydrodynamic and hydromagnetic stability. 1960s, studied the equilibrium and stability of ellipsoidal figures and general relativity. 71 to 83, studied mathematical theory of black holes. And in the late 80s, worked on the theory of colliding gravitational waves. And so he became an expert in all of those.
I just think he must have been so lazy. I mean,
yeah, basically, he is, as my kids would say, an absolute bang out. And so we should just there's just a few little things that we should mention, some weird ones. So in 1957, he was the editor of the Astrophysical Journal, and Eugene Parker of the Parker Solar Probe fame, the only living person ever to have a space probe named after him, submitted the paper that essentially got him this fame about solar winds, and it was rejected. But because Chandrasekhar was the editor, he went, no, I can't see anything wrong with it, and published it anyway, which is very unusual.
That is unusual.
Peer-reviewed by the editor. There's an asteroid named after Chandra. The Himalayan Chandra Telescope is obviously named after him. He guided 45 students to their PhDs. Carl Sagan studied maths under him at University of Chicago.
Whoa.
And when University of Chicago had a symposium on Chandra's 100th birthday, it was attended by Roger Penrose, Kip Thorne, Freeman Dyson, Jayant V. Nalika, Rashid Shunyev, G. Srinvasan, and Clifford Will.
Heavyweights.
No matter how bad my pronunciation of their names is.
Exactly.
Space Legend of the Week?
Well, pretty deserved, I'd say.
Yeah, I reckon so.
Tip of the cap. Matt, what else has been going on?
I woke up this morning to the very sad news that Paul Allen has passed away.
Oh.
Sad, isn't it?
He
died at 65 from some cancer.
Oh, that's young.
Very young. But here's an interesting fact. He was described by Quincy Jones as the second coming of Hendrix.
Whoa. That's a quote.
If Quincy Jones says he's good, then I'm willing to go with that.
Probably all right. Yeah.
Yeah, Quincy Jones is also a bang out. Yeah, obviously Paul Allen's most famous for persuading his mate Bill Gates to set up a computer company called Microsoft.
Yeah, I don't think you'd stop thanking that person, would you?
No. So yes, incredibly rich. He obviously makes the Stratolauncher, the largest plane that will ever fly. And of course, what's really sad is he won't get to see it fly.
That is sad.
Also the winner of the X Prize with the first commercial space plane. He spent a lot of money on things like Ebola research and things like that, and like huge amounts of philanthropy.
Well, I think we should definitely dedicate this podcast to him. What an amazing man.
Greatly missed, and what a shame that he won't see Stratolauncher fly. That's sad, isn't it?
Oh, that is sad. Well, thoughts are with his friends and family.
In a very close escape of Nick Hague and Alexei Ovchinin.
Yes, I mean, wow, what a moment.
Yeah, so they were recovered in good health after the emergency landing of the Soyuz MS-10.
Now, Matt, break it down for me. What happened?
Those who have been living under a rock or were on holiday when all this happened, I guess it's one of the biggest news stories of the year, is that, for the first time in 35 years, the Soyuz had a failure in manned flight, that is, a failure. So MS-10, 139th flight of the Soyuz spacecraft, carrying Expedition 57 to the International Space Station. But after a few minutes after liftoff, there was a contingency abort because one of the boosters had failed and the capsule returned to Earth.
I mean, we forget that it's been so reliable that we forget that we've almost just got used to nothing happening.
Mm.
But of course, it's pretty dangerous business, isn't it?
It is very dangerous. So we'll see how dangerous.
It's just remarkable that this sort of thing doesn't happen more, Matthew.
It is, but it's not good considering the controversy that's already around MS-9. This MS-10 failure is not good for Roscosmos. But the story did get better during the week. Not quite sure how, but anyway, the MS-10 was aborted, and it's the first time that's happened in 43 years. Sorry, I did say 35 earlier on. Right. Since 1975, was the last time they had to do a high altitude abort. And it looks like what happened was, as it flew up, one of the boosters, as it was being ejected, didn't eject properly, and they think it's to do with the top part not being pushed away properly by like a jet of oxygen that pushes the top part away from a sort of ball-bearing joint at the top. And because it wasn't pushed away, as it came down, it scraped along the core of the rocket and obviously damaged the rocket to an extent that it started falling apart. At which point, the spacecraft itself goes, there's something wrong here. And this is at 31 miles high, 50 kilometres.
Oh my God, imagine being in there.
So the spacecraft itself, computers go, right, something's wrong, and goes through the abort procedure. But at this point, it's so high that the launch escape tower had already been ejected. And it's only recently, and since the 80s onwards, from the Soyuz T and TM series, that the shroud that covers the capsule, or I suppose what some people call the fairing, that covers the capsule. It's only recently that they've installed these what's known as RDG motors, which I believe are the 11D86OM isolating motors.
Yeah, that's them.
That's them, and they're in the shroud, and they basically the sort of there's I think there used to be like a sort of 10-second window where there was no way to abort. So once you get to a certain height, you can abort just using your normal rockets because there's no sort of thrust behind you. And obviously you can use the escape tab, but there used to be a sort of area where you couldn't abort. So they put that right with these RDG motors, and they're the ones that actually fired and took the crew to safety. So that was a ballistic trajectory back home, and by ballistic it means, when you throw a stone up in the air, it makes a sort of parabolic arc. That is kind of like the definition of ballistics, as in that kind of trajectory.
Okay.
So that is the trajectory it makes. It just sort of goes up in the air and then just starts coming down. Now that is a very high G thing to go through.
About 6 to 7 times Earth gravity. Yeah,
6 or 7 G during that. And normally what happens is the Soyuz uses its aerodynamic shape to skip along the atmosphere and keep up in the atmosphere. And you can control it like an aircraft, and so that you can come into a landing zone where you want to land, roughly. But it also is a lot more controlled, whereas ballistically, you are just falling, and it is quite rough, to say the least. So
I just think, as well as how terrifying that must have been for the astronauts, imagine how frustrated you'd be, as you land and you're safe. Imagine how annoyed you'd be at just, it's like, how long till we get back up? What next?
Imagine being the family watching that happen, going, because it's a few, it was quite a long time before the rescue teams had got to them and made contact with them. But yeah, so they were search and rescue team found the spacecraft 250 miles from the launch site in Kyrgyzstan in Kazakhstan. And NASA were able to contact them. They were flown back to Baikonur, where the families met them and gave them a big hug, which was a really touching moment. And Russian government announced that all future manned Soyuz launches are suspended. There's a state commission to investigate the incident and also a criminal investigation. And this is at the time where MSO9 is also in a similar situation where there's a state commission and possible criminal investigation.
A criminal investigation? Why?
Well, just in case it's sabotage or some form of neglect, industrial neglect.
Wow.
When you're talking about people's lives, in I guess in the same way that on a gig, if the PA fell down, there'd be a criminal investigation then as well, I suppose. Got it.
The
repercussions are the ISS crew. They're fine, of course, but their MSO9 capsule, the one with the hole in it, is the only lifeboat that they have to return back to Earth now, because they should have had MS-10 up there as a lifeboat to come back. But the Soyuz capsules, they have a limited lifespan of 200 days, and that's because of the peroxide fuel that they have. It starts decomposing, so it can't be used. It only lasts until late December. So if they are to get off, they need to get off before late December, which leaves NASA and everyone else in a terrible position that the ISS might have to be abandoned and controlled from Earth, which is fine. But of course, if there's any kind of anything that goes wrong that requires the human touch, like a fire extinguisher, for example, or something needs fixing, may have to be deorbited into the ocean, which would be a disaster considering we've only just started doing proper science on the International Space Station. It costs $2 billion a year, and it costs whatever it costs to put up there in the first place, a lot of money. So it would be absolutely catastrophic if that would happen.
It really would be. Let's just keep our fingers crossed that they've learned something from this.
Yeah, well, one of the things that Jim Bridenstine said, which absolutely is this whole idea of dissimilar redundancy. I like that. Was the fact that what you need is more than one nation capable of getting up to the International Space Station, so that if a launch vehicle is suspended, you can still get there. You've got to have this dissimilar redundancy. Which
where's the plan B?
Well, and the plan B has been SpaceX and Boeing with their commercial launches. But the latest news is from Bridenstine is that he was saying that he's at the moment thinks that they're going to carry on being to schedule, and that by the time they've completed their investigation, which is going to be over very soon, it'll just be back to normal. So that means, and the schedule was that they'll be flying early December.
Blimey, okay. So he reckons that it's not going to halt it at all.
Yeah, and that may be moved earlier to late November, depending on the outcome of the investigation. So we might actually see an earlier flight than scheduled.
Well, I guess that makes sense. Blimey.
Yeah.
Good luck, boys. And girls.
Two things that won't be happening that we mentioned on the same podcast is the United Arab Emirates astronauts will not be flying in April now. Almost certainly they will get bumped off their flight of Chevnin, who obviously have his flight reassigned.
Yes.
So that they've definitely lost their thing. But of course, there's loads of experiments as well on the ISS that will be affected because it requires multiple astronauts to be working on them, and there's only really 2 astronauts able to work on experiments at any one time now. So NanoRacks said that a lot of their experiments they can do from the ground, and they've been working on that to relieve the astronauts of workload. So some of the experiments can still carry on as normal, but it will basically start falling behind schedule. But interestingly, they were ahead of schedule because they had more astronauts. US had more astronauts on board than normal because they were taking advantage of the fact that that the Russians had cut back on their cosmonauts to save a bit of money.
Ah, okay. I'm glad that no one got hurt this time.
Yeah, I must admit, when that first happened, I was just thinking of all the news stories that are going to be affected by it that we talk about, and it was practically all of them. The commercial launch was definitely going to be affected. Everything that we talked about in terms of the ISS and things like that. I mean, it's still, the ISS, I suppose, is in slight peril. But more the fact, if you listen to our last few podcasts, we kind of taking the mickey out of Russia's space program because it's clearly something's not quite right.
This is it. There's going to have to be a huge change if they are to go forward. So what else is happening, Matt?
Richard Branson has suspended the Saudi Arabian investment, the billions of investment in space ventures because of this missing journalist, Jamal Khashoggi. Which apparently wandered into the Saudi Arabian consulate in Turkey and was murdered.
Well, I saw a quote, which I obviously need to look into a lot more, but I saw a quote that said the interrogation went wrong. It's like, yeah, it looks like it's really gone wrong there.
Yeah, so...
But do you know what blows my mind, Matt, is... And I don't want to get too political. Let's keep it space. But it's kind of annoying that our government and people like Branson are now, and US, now saying, oh, well, we're going to sanction Saudi Arabia and, our investment, it's not going to happen anymore. But you're thinking, do you have any idea about the human rights that go on in Saudi Arabia?
Well,
for for decades.
I am going to get political. I'm going to say that all the three countries we've mentioned so far, United Arab Emirates, who currently are torturing a British man at the moment. You've got Saudi Arabia, who's is just doesn't bear thinking about, and of course Russia, who think it's okay to just go around murdering British citizens on the streets of Britain. None of them. It's maybe we are sort of mixing with the wrong people.
And how does Putin get away with saying, "Oh no, they're just civilians," Yeah, and then gets busted, and it just seemingly just gets swept under the carpet? It's like, are you crazy? Anyway, let's get back to space.
I will say this: I think that space so far has been a very, very good place for countries to engage and work together for the peaceful exploitation of space. Totally
agree. Let's leave it at that.
One of my favourite news stories this week was Eric Berger did a piece on, and we've talked about your mate. You brought this to my attention, the Blink-182 frontman.
Oh, that's right. Yes, Tom DeLonge.
Yeah, he's
unbelievable.
So his UFO project is £37 million. Now, this is funny. So Eric Berger put in debt, but it's not in debt. It's what did the guy put? I'm going to have to go to this tweet. The guy put he had a right go at Eric. I'm not going to name this guy, but he had a go at Eric because it was a deficit rather than a debt. But still, the story still holds as far as I'm concerned. It
is an amazing story.
What an absolute muppet for spending all this money on this UFO project.
I mean, I had no idea until the Joe Rogan podcast came out, which is what I sent you. And if you haven't listened to it, our beloved followers, please Google Joe Rogan Tom DeLonge podcast. You can watch it on video or on audio. And it's incredible. I mean, it's hilarious that he is not joking. That's what is hilarious about it.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like Muppetry to the maximum. So there we go. And this guy who's having a go at Eric Berger because he's got his facts ever so slightly wrong. It's like, but the rest of the story is still right, and it's
exactly.
And the fact is a $37 million deficit on a stupid UFO. That 37, he should have been more like Paul Allen and spent that $37 million on something way more useful. Like maybe giving it to universities to get kids through their PhDs, etc.
Why don't you educate them on actually sourcing, how to source facts, how to get them peer reviewed, and how not to believe batshit crazy conspiracies all the time?
Yeah, absolutely ridiculous. Jamie.
Yes, Matt.
I have got my interview with Miles Carden, the Spaceport director of Spaceport.
I'll tell you what, I've been looking forward to this.
I know, it's been in the can for a while, and I've not been... Every time we were going to put it out, we had another interview that had to be slotted in before because it was more time constraints.
We put this one in the bank, and now it's time to withdraw.
Time to make a space withdrawal.
Yeah.
Nice. I like it. But before we do, I want to wish Ariane 5 launch of the third and final cornerstone mission of the Horizons 2000 Plus program.
Yes.
Bepi Colombo.
Excellent stuff. Good luck, guys.
I feel very close to it because I actually saw it being fueled and stood right next to it.
Last week was a bad week for space. This week, Matt, it's going to be good, I can tell.
Miles Carden. Écoutez.
Roll it.
Here I am at the new County Hall in Truro. I'm joined by George, and I'm also joined by Miles Carden, who is the Spaceport Director of Spaceport Cornwall. Hello, Miles.
Good morning.
So, first of all, the question I'm dying to ask is, how did you become a Spaceport Director?
You might ask. It's a relatively long story, but I think a probably logical one. I've worked at Cornwall Airport, Newquay now for almost 8 or 9 years, and so I've got a good background in aviation aerospace, and obviously the spaceport is a horizontally launched spaceport, so it's about aircraft and aviation really, predominantly. So I've got a good basic understanding how those aircraft are going to operate. So actually, when we're developing other business areas at the airport, spaceport was a very, very natural fit for what we're doing with other technology. We're looking at unmanned aircraft, drones you may call them. So space planes were quite an easy fit for me, really. So I sort of fell into it in a way, but with a fairly good background in aviation aerospace.
Excellent. So Spaceport Cornwall's all about horizontal launch. What is it about horizontal launch that's special and makes it worth pursuing?
Well, yes, absolutely. We are only horizontal launch. We're not a safe or good place to do vertical. We'll leave that to others. We'll leave that to Scotland and Sutherland for the new spaceport in Scotland. And that's a natural fit. So we always knew there's a vertical and horizontal launch a dynamic in Cornwall. We think horizontal is really almost a bit cooler than vertical. We think this is the new way. Obviously, you look at some of the activity in America around the sort of new commercialization space, the Elon Musk, the Jeff Bezos of this world. Some have gone the vertical route, like Elon Musk and his SpaceX. Others have gone towards horizontal, like Richard Branson, looking at both satellite launch horizontally, but also human space flight. And you've got some amazing machines like Stratolauncher out of the US as well, looking at horizontal launch as well, and that's a bespoke aircraft. So we think it's quite exciting, the horizontal launch aspect, and pretty cool for the UK, because where Cornwall's placed, it's a really good location to get into the North Atlantic, to access some very specific launch sites remotely. We're pretty excited about it, and we think it's a little bit more longer term, and some of the technology that might kind of come out of it regarding sort of supersonic aircraft or hypersonic aircraft, out of those sort of technology strands, are really, really good.
So I was going to ask about the supersonic and the hypersonic and possibly SSTO style aircraft. Is that something you are? Is that a long-term objective of the spaceport? Yeah,
I mean, obviously, when we announced Virgin Orbit as our partner recently, is that there's what you might say they're a traditional horizontal launch company. That's a civilian airliner with a rocket attached to the wings. That's quite traditional in a way. But as you start to talk about other avenues of technologies, then as a spaceport, it won't only be about that. We're having active discussions about how we might return a system from orbit. So there are existing orbital systems in the world, and they may need a base to return a payload or an emergency return, because obviously we used to be, a long time ago, an emergency shuttle location for shuttle return at Newquay. So again, that might well be something we look at. So it's not only about those things. Obviously, we're really keen to look at human spaceflight as well.
Yeah.
That's a key strand for us. That's quite a challenge in the UK. You operating those systems in UK airspace is pretty challenging, but we think we can do that in due course. So all those things start to come to you in the end. We are having discussions about propulsion technologies and propulsion testing. So I think horizontal with an airport allows you to access those technologies. Clearly, I would say this, wouldn't I? Yeah. But with a vertical launch pad in northern Scotland, you can't do that stuff. They can do really exciting stuff with vertical launch rockets, but can't do the sort of all the things around things that have wings, things that are going to return to you.
Yeah. So if for example, Reaction Engines built a precursor to Skylon, that would be the kind of thing that would be flying out of Newquay.
Yeah, and we really love that. I mean, the sort of reusable orbital aircraft are probably our ultimate aim. That's where we want to go to. That's where the technology leads you. So even you look at Stratolauncher in the US, they're already talking about having an orbital system being carried by their passenger aircraft, and I'm sure if you looked at Virgin Orbit's future the dark ops room, they'd be looking at that sort of thing as well. So it's where that technology leads you in terms of launch. So a system that returns from space to either takes off from our airport and goes to space and then returns, or even something coming back from space and returns to the airport, are pretty cool. I think that's cool.
No, absolutely. So tell us a little bit more about your partnership with Virgin Orbit then. How did that come about, and how long has that been in the pipeline? And take us from the beginning.
For the beginning, we're now part of the Virgin family, so perhaps I can now talk about that opening, which is nice. Obviously, post our announcement of Farnborough. So we probably had well over 2 years discussions with the company. We were party to a proposition to government, to work with government to produce a spaceport with Virgin, and that's where our relationship started. And we looked virtually at bringing Virgin Galactic system to the UK, and that's still what we wish to bring in due course. So we are very keen on human spaceflight and having that ambition. We think the UK should be ambitious about having a human spaceflight dynamic, particularly horizontally. I think that's really exciting, and to be the first flight in Europe to have that sort of aspect is really good. So obviously we've been looking at developing that, and actually we've been through some hard times with Virgin. We went through the tragic accident in Mojave with the Virgin Galactic system, but they still wish to move that forward and move our discussions forward. And we came to a conclusion probably maybe about a year or so ago. You expect us to be earlier than that we needed to get an anchor, a first market mover operator at our spaceport. There are many spaceports around the world that don't have operators. So it was critical for us to make sure we got that relationship right with Virgin, and actually made a decision to concentrate on having one initial operator, because that's key.
Yeah.
You can't have a build it and he will come approach with spaceports in our view. Yeah. I can't, with our partners like the Local Enterprise Partnership and Cornwall Council, I can't sell that as an investable proposition. So we made a conscious decision, let's get the best operator. And that best operator chose us as the best location in the UK, and that gives obviously clearly a lot of reassurance to proceed with spaceport, because we are the best, not only the best place from what we believe is the best place spaceport, but the industry, one of the only early mover players in horizontal launch has chosen us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing that I did notice in the press release of after you came out as this horizontal launch facility and being a spaceport, there was a few detractors sort of saying that spaceports in general, say the commercial ones that have opened up in America, for example, haven't really seen much space flight yet, and that it hasn't taken off, and they were sort of giving like very good examples of the ones dotted around America. Is that something that's a worry, or do you think that the market is poised to take off, literally, obviously? I
think that's a very important point. I think it is just about that. I don't think we may even recognise how important the moment we're at with launch. We've been looking at Elon Musk and SpaceX and his Falcon Heavy and his Tesla in space, and that's amazing stuff. But you look at some of the horizontal launch players as well. They've moved on significantly, and they've maybe keeping that a little bit quiet. Exciting with Virgin Galactic having another power test most recently in America, and that seems great trajectory towards launch, and that wasn't the case 4 or 5 years ago. And a lot of players have come and gone as well in the period. Well, I've been involved in space for 4 or 5 years. We've lost some players out of that. Xcore were when we first got involved with Spaceport. Xcore were one of the touted, one of the potential first prime movers. Fortunately, that hasn't happened, and they've fallen by the wayside. And there's one or two others. I think space stations were another carried system, but more have come in than have been lost.
Yeah.
And if you look at Virgin Orbit, Stratolauncher, and some other ones from the US at the moment, Dream Chaser, for example, a Sierra Nevada Corporation system, that's not going to launch over us because it's vertical, but it might return to us.
Right. So
those are the sort of things, more and more dynamics come into the marketplace. So I think that, I don't think we probably recognised, I think Brian Cox did an amazing programme, the 21st Century Race for Space, I think it's called. And he said at the end that we're on the cusp of a significant change of our sort of move away from the Earth, particularly around human spaceflight. So I think we are on that moment, and that's why we're encouraged to do that. 4 years ago, it was a very different dynamic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, that's really encouraging. I mean, the other thing is, this proliferation of the small satellite launch market. So you've got, Electron and a whole heap of things that have just come in, including obviously the Scottish spaceport as well. And there's lots and lots and lots of companies building small satellite launchers. Is the small satellite market going to be big enough to sustain it? And the one thing that I do ask the question a lot is I know it's a lot cheaper to launch on a bigger rocket and it brings the price right down, but you don't have a kind of bespoke launch. Is the market there to sort of pay more for these bespoke launches? Is that, and why is that when it's quite, considerably more expensive for a bespoke launch?
As you probably expect, it's very complex, and we're obviously very reliant on Virgin Orbit in terms of the marketplace and the payload. But we're working pretty hard now. We are working with colleagues in the catapults and the satellite and Innovate UK to build that market, because part of our piece is to build that market in the UK. I don't think all the evidence shows you that demand will be there, so that people want satellites to do things, if that's the right sense. Have we got the right people to make enough satellites to do those things? I don't think we have. And I think the market will catch up. So we're working pretty hard, and we talk a lot around if we have a launch system operating in the UK, we need to change buying choices. So you have satellite manufacturers or providers that are looking for launch. They may have those buying choices set out well in advance. So we may need to change those. If we're seriously talking about a launch in 2020, which we are, second quarter 2020, we think we can do. So next Farnborough Air Show, we want to go back to Farnborough with having done a launch in the UK. We think it's pretty exciting. We think we can do that. Regulation aside, I might come back to regulation and what are the risks of not doing that. So we do need to work hard to build that market case, and particularly so the UK can capture that market as much as other countries around the world. So yes, there are a lot of small launches. There aren't many small launches that are going towards launch. There's a huge list of 30 or 40 small launches in development, but only 4 or 5 of those, by people who know these sort of things, are sort of saying that they will be probably in operation in the next 4 years.
Right.
So there aren't so many as it seems. And there are some good ones. Rocket Lab's Electron System obviously launched down in New Zealand, rumoured to be linked to Scotland, but I'm not sure that's been confirmed yet. So there are some good launches, but they are quite small. Obviously, Virgin Orbit is a little bit on the larger side of the small launcher family, if that's the right term, technically. So Virgin Orbit's gross payload is 500 kilograms, about 300 to 350 net, depending on what orbit you want. So it is slightly larger than some of the other smaller systems around. So if you're looking at out of Farnborough, we sort of now know what the launcher market in the UK is going to be. So we've got Lockheed Martin and Orbex in Scotland, and both of their payloads are below 200 kilograms, I believe, or somewhat less. Depends what Lockheed actually proposed in the end. And we've got Virgin Orbit operating out of Newquay. So that's the given. There's a couple others, like we're working with Skyora, a vertical launch company. They're coming down to us to test with us initially, but they will eventually go to Scotland for launch. So we sort of know who those are going to be and the number of launches are going to be, because we know now the frequency. So you've got your total market piece in the UK. So is the capacity in the UK to actually fill those payloads over the next 3, 4, 5, 10 years? Well, we need to work hard to make sure that's not leaked out of the UK and it's retained. So we're doing that at the moment, working with that, and we hope to work with Lockheed Martin in Scotland to make sure that works for UK.
Every £1 billion you give to NASA, you get 10 billion back. So why is it only now we are considering a British space launch?
Well, haven't we got a rather bad fact with the UK, with one of the only countries ever to acquire launch capability, then give up on it? So perhaps we just delayed that back in the 70s, but I think that's incredible statistics. So I think in terms of I've always been involved with horizontal launch spaceports, and the Department for Transport 5 years ago put a proposition out that they thought there was a marketplace for launch, and we got the opportunity. We think the right side to do that. I think the government may need to. We would like the government to think a little bit differently about how they do things. In terms of, it's really about goes at that payload market piece. There are some early year risk around the payload demand in the UK. So what we'd like the UK government to do is to think about how could they support that. And if you look in America with NASA, they would they in broad terms, in simplistic terms, guarantee payload. So they will buy a certain amount of payload and therefore contract with a SpaceX. But they can quite neatly come back in and step in and do an academic or a scientific payload or a military payload and fill that gap. So if you guarantee it, it's not really. If you can fill it, then you're not really guaranteeing it, and that's a much more difficult UK position because there's just simply not the size and scale of market here. But we want to move that. We'd like the UK and the UK Space Agency to move towards where they could go to a NASA position of contracting with commercial operators to guarantee or buy payload. Militarily, academic or scientifically, or something they sell otherwise. So that's something we're working on, and we hope to make progress with that. But it's a much smaller industry in the UK than the US, so it's a little bit more difficult to do that. So interesting times, I think. And I think we now know where on the spaceports where we stand. We sort of know where we launches we're going to where we understand, and now we're going to make sure that market is sustainable. Because the critical thing for us, we don't want to build this thing and then we get free launches and it disappears. We want this to be long term.
I think that's a really interesting point. That's something that I'd not heard of, was the fact that, you were actually encouraging the builders of the satellites as well. Is that one of the reasons that make a British spaceport so likeable in the fact that you build it in Britain and you don't have to transport it very far to get it into space? Is that a factor?
No, well, that's part of the factors. I mean, I think there's whole things around providing different services to around the launch. So, I mean, one of the reasons why you'd have a launch site in the UK is to tap into the UK launch the satellite manufacturing market. Why wouldn't you be close to your market? But I think we can also attract Western Europe demand as well, because UK being well placed strategically in the Atlantic means we've got some advantages that Europe doesn't have. So there's clearly some similar countries like Spain and Portugal, and we've got to have a mind to look at Spain and Portugal, because they could easily take our market advantage. We want to capture a bit of market advantage here. So we think if we get first mover advantage in a horizontal launch spaceport, that might stop others grasping that or progressing their plans in the same way. We need to be competitive though and affordable for launches. We can't have this. Forgive me, we can't have maybe a Spaceport America, which was a bespoke system, but we can't afford in a way a $200 million facility, because that we need a payback on that. So, and we don't think we need that for satellite launch. So, and we think we need very little. We don't very little for that's the beauty of it. We want to use our airport really efficiently. So bring a system in and be able to launch from there. So we need to be very aware that other players in Europe will look at the UK and see whether they can have a piece of that action. I think to some extent some countries simply won't be able to do that because these things are very difficult to overfly. So if you're in a landlocked European country, you're not going to be a horizontal launch nation. I don't believe that there'll be too many problems involved with that. And also, even getting close to other countries' territories is going to be challenging. So, there are countries well placed like Spain and Portugal could easily look at that. But I think important for us in the marketplace is we have regulatory advantage in the UK. Because we had the space industry bill that went through Parliament this year. That gives us a huge advantage. Of course, you can catch up, but we shouldn't treat that very lightly. The UK have done that very quickly. To be fair, through challenging times through Parliament. So we were pretty amazed, and the industry saw that as really a statement of intent from the UK. Look, we're going to do this. We're going to put the legislation in place. We're going to have the secondary legislation through next year, hopefully. And I think that will give us considerable advantage in Europe. There's no other place in Europe can do that at the moment. So there may be ideas around it from Italy or from Spain to do a spaceport, but they've got to get the regulation in place first and the law. You can't do it without the legal right to do it. And so that's a good thing. So I always, as a sort of promoter of a site, it's good to have market advantage as my proposition. So and that's pretty much what we're about. And that's already so a lot of interest from the US investor-wise. So they're looking at the UK saying, are they serious about this? And actually don't underestimate how a piece of law can show some intent.
With Virgin Orbit, are you tied to Virgin Orbit, or would you look at other systems like Stratolaunch launching out of Newquay?
We have exclusive rights with Virgin for in the UK, so we know where their UK base. They know that in order to make the spaceport, they also want an affordable spaceport. They're light on infrastructure, so they want to go to a spaceport, launch satellites, and not have a £100 million cost to do that. They want to go around the world to pick up individual launch sites in the world, maybe have a dozen or so launch sites in due course, maybe 4 or 5 initially. So Eastern, Western Seaboard, the US, Pacific, and Europe, and maybe Middle East. So they'll be picking up those particular locations where they can do that. And they don't want a big on cost. They want to go in, launch a satellite at a cost-effective manner, and then depart, because the customers are going to end up having to pay for that. So we're pretty comfortable with that relationship, but they also know that in order to make it affordable, we can bring others in. So we need revenue as a spaceport. They're our prime mover. We're going to make sure we look after Virgin and make sure we don't bring competitors in that are going to destroy their market. So we know we've got a special relationship with Virgin over as part of the Virgin family, but we will bring others in. They know that. So we're looking at other systems. And technologies from orbit. So I've mentioned orbital systems. We're already in discussions around systems that return to us, and we're starting to have exciting conversations about what we do with the aircraft that's come back from space, which is really quite incredible. We're looking at how we treat that aircraft, how we operate it, and then return it to back into that. We're looking at other vertical launch technologies. Balloon was one of them, which we're considering, which will act more like an aircraft in airspace terms. So it's not a traditional vertical launch. It will launch vertically, but will more likely be treated like an aircraft from an airport than a vertical launch rocket in regulation terms. We're yet to see that, but there's some really exciting things around there. There's some other human spaceflight systems in the world that we're looking at. You mentioned Strata Launcher. That's a big aircraft. So we'd have to think very carefully of Strata Launcher operating out of us. We really see how that system develops, because it's going to need, and that's why Virgin Orbit haven't gone that route, because Strata Launcher is a very, very large aircraft, and that's an obvious statement, over 100-metre wingspan. The track of the aircraft, the two fuselages are over 45 metres wide. So that has some, and that will be, we could not operate that aircraft out of our airport today.
Right.
But we will adapt to our airport in the future. So if that aircraft develops, and I'm sure through testing, it won't need less width, but it might need. We can't even operate Strata Launcher for length reasons. It needs a longer runway than we've got. So, but those systems will develop, and the technology will develop over time. So, and the regulations will change about what you need to operate it. So, more and more systems will hopefully be able to come to us. But it might be that the system they launch will return to us from space, and that's what we're looking at the moment. Is building this sort of ecosystem of launchers. That hopefully will make our business case work, because it is a challenge to make a spaceport work commercially. That's one of the challenges that we need to look at.
Other than a runway, what else does a spaceport actually need to function as a spaceport?
Well, not a huge amount really. I mean, you can build grand terminals and grand buildings to house your aircraft, but at the moment at this stage we want to get towards a launch. So we want to get our prime thing is to get operational license for our spaceport and a launch. And we want to be the first launch off UK soil. We want Cornwall to be the first place that the UK. I know we've had launches from Australia and the US, but we want the first British Isles launch to be from Cornwall in 2020.
Am I right?
We can do that.
Am I right in saying if you did do that in 2020, that you'd be the first orbital launch from Europe? Full stop.
I didn't know whether I was going to try and check that stat.
Yeah,
it's a really
I know.
interesting one.
I keep asking it, but no one quite answers it. But I think it is. I can't.
There's been a lot of suborbital stuff.
Lots of suborbitals. From...
and sort of other stuff's going on. But I've not been able to pin that fact down, because I didn't know it had been done from the north. Yeah. So obviously you've got to set up military activity as well and stuff like that. So I didn't know whether Norway or Sweden had done something from the north, but I wasn't entirely sure. Because there is Spaceport Sweden. I know they have plans for vertical, and I wasn't sure that something had been done from Northern Europe, polar in the past. There's a stat I wanted to go out. I like that sort of stats.
Yeah, so. No, I'm going to do a bit more digging in that one, because
you find that one out. Let me know.
I think it is. But I still haven't found the definitive, because I've never seen it in print whether they're talking about launch, and I think I'm going to try and find that.
It's quite difficult to find out about British launches. And the launch, our last launch was from Woomera. We've done quite a lot with the NASA in the US, but I think the aerial program was the reason I know my boat's called Aerial. So
okay.
I'm going to look at it. It's a SpaceLink boat name, but we did launch some satellites back in the 60s, 70s from the US. I know we did. And then obviously Woomera was when the program was stopped in Australia. So we want Cornwall to be the first launch, and we can do that. We don't need much infrastructure. So what do we need? We need to operate this large aircraft, Boeing 747. We're capable of doing that. Yeah. We need to basic handling of the fuel, but it's not what I call it that exotic. It's a LOX kerosene mix or a rocket propellant mix. So that's not too difficult to handle. We need a simple integration facility. We probably need a basic clean room facility so we can integrate the satellites into the rocket, and some kit to make sure we handle the rocket. So get this very large rocket from Virgin Orbit, and you see pictures of it in the US, amazingly large. And then we need the ability to get that safely onto the aircraft and then launch it from there. So regulation aside, so the bits of things we need about regulation. So how are they going to ask us to treat the aircraft, i.e. fire cover and stuff like that. And that's behind the scenes stuff. So, and not difficult. The regulation tends to be you do this and you jump. Yeah. So we want to test that, but we want to make sure that the regulation is proportionate, so we can keep the affordability thing driving. But that's pretty key for us, is keep the cost down. Not to be cheap, but keep the cost down so we can, but don't have to pass that cost onto the initial operator. So we've got to make sure the UK is competitive. If it's not, people will go elsewhere. This is a global marketplace. So in a post-Brexit world, we're going to make sure we're bang on with the costs down.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to mention Brexit, but does Brexit actually give us a little bit of an advantage when it comes to attracting trade from around the world for our launch system that maybe Portugal and Spain won't have? Or is that too early to tell?
I think it's really interesting. I'm a marketeer, so I'm going to see the positive opportunity out of Brexit rather than the negative. And I generally, in the field we're in, so space and spaceports, we do get a lot of positive. So we were in Colorado at the Space Symposium a few months ago, and a lot of positivity from the US. Why wouldn't the UK be the first step out of the US, the most natural, easiest first step from the US for their technology? And the Trump administration, Vice President Pence was at that symposium, shows the importance of space to the US, and he was talking about the US for growth and jobs in the US. They need their technology to be global. So I think that's a really positive statement from our point of view. I would say a positive Brexit. We need trade deals, but we need the bilaterals between the US government and the UK. That might be easier in the UK and US alone rather than US, UK and Europe. Time will tell. I think we need the Brexit to be on a proper footing. Otherwise, that might make the US investors nervous. So we need a good Brexit. I'll put it in just those terms. And then we can have sensible conversations with the US about sort of trade deals and bilateral agreements, technology agreements from the US to the UK, and then we're big set. So definitely a positive, and the US generally is seeing it as a positive opportunity to invest in the UK, maybe as an easier option than investing in Europe. Time will tell.
Yeah. But my last question then really is about what's the relationship that Spaceport Cornwall will have with ESA? Or is there one?
Well, not in broad terms, not at the moment. We're predominantly dealing with the UK Space Agency. We're starting to have inroads into ESA funding routes into some of our operators are. So some of the operators we're dealing with have strong relationship and are being funded by ESA for development. We've got one company called Orbital Access, which I haven't mentioned yet, a British company who are partnering with things like reaction engines and one or two others. They've got an orbital-based system, and they're already looking they've got some pathfinding funding from ESA looking at their orbital system. So not directly, but we're hoping as the next stage when we get towards operations. Obviously, they will have involvement with the regulation of the orbital aspects, but a lot of that interaction currently is with our operators, not us directly. But I think that would change dramatically. We've had quite a lot of talking about propulsion testing because we're starting some propulsion testing later this year. We started that with Bloodhound supersonic car. When they came to the airport about a year ago. And they did some rocket testing with us, and they'll be back with us next year. But they're partnering with Skyora to do that. So Skyora, a vertical launch company, that's quite cool. We do some quite cool things at the airport around supersonic cars and spaceships and stuff like that. So that's quite good.
Yeah, that is really cool.
Yeah.
If in 2020 and the Interplanetary podcast come down for the first launch, what will we expect to see? What kind of...
and I was
what's it going to be like?
I was picking up a theme from one of your other podcasts where you talked about, it's going to be a bit boring, isn't it? We don't think so. I mean, the beauty of horizontal launch is this aircraft will take off from us quite casually in a way, run day-to-day stuff, and that's the point. And we'll launch remotely.
Right.
So it will fly away from us 300 or 400 nautical miles west of us, west of Ireland, and then do its launch at 40,000 feet. So that's not clearly going to be visible from our airport. There are some good things around safety because we're taking the launch a long way from people, which is I think a good thing. Environmentally, so all the stuff you're doing regarding propulsion is done at an altitude, so it's cleaner. We've got to work on the clean bit, but we like that. But I still think a Boeing 747 taking off from the airport with a rocket attached to its wing is pretty cool. Yeah. And you will be able to see it.
Trust me, I'll be there.
And of course, you'll be able to see it. I would challenge people to go and see the vertical launch. It's going to be really challenging to get to, and to the safety area around it will be quite significant. So I think we'll be able to get really close
Yeah.
You know, you better go up to the Boeing 747 and see it. You might better go and touch the rocket and stuff like that. That's quite cool. So the contact with the launch vehicle, and these days with technology, we'll be able to get that because we've got the carrier aircraft, the Boeing 747, with all its telemetry and data on it. You'll be able to see that launch from that aircraft. So we've beamed that back to Newquay. So you see the whole sort of journey to space, we hope, from our side. So I think it's going to be, Boeing 747 is a pretty large aircraft. So hopefully we'll tell. So the general plan is we would like to get to early. We think we could do it Q1. Regulation, if it allows us, so first quarter, that's calendar quarter in 2020, we think we can do it. We probably won't do it then because of weather. So what we'll probably do is look at maybe a May, June, maybe a July launch 2020, and then we'll hopefully we'll have Cosmic Girl, the 747 in this country, and then we might take her back to Farnborough in July. So we're flying to Farnborough and take her in there as our exhibit there. So that'd be a nice plan.
Oh, man,
that's my vision.
Yeah, that does sound absolutely brilliant.
Having done the first launch from the UK soil, we'll then take the aircraft to Farnborough and have our stand on this Boeing 747 rather than the main hall at Farnborough. So rather than the model, we'll take the real aircraft. That's a lot of planning in there, but that's my vision. That's what I'd like to see, and that's what we're working to. And we've got some exciting things going on with why do I do this and get out of bed in the morning. Fundamentally, I'm doing it because we haven't talked about it much, about the educational impact from this. So we're getting massive. I get a phone call every day from a local school. Can you come and chat to our children to talk about space and launch and stuff? There's so much excitement from kids around this spinning like a Newquay. How can I get into space? What GCSE? What exams do I need to take? What's my route to become a space engineer or an astronaut even? I love that because that's a great ambition, isn't it? So I'm really, really keen to get involved with our educational program, get people excited about space and getting into space as a career. And the physical launch does that. And having a visual launch, having this great big aircraft, Boeing 747 with Virgin Orbit on the side, with a rocket attached, bring children down to Newquay to see this happen. So I don't think it will be unexciting. I think a Boeing 747 is a very large aircraft.
Right.
So we'll make it exciting, don't we?
Cool.
But not too exciting. Let it be safe.
So does the airport actually run like a normal airport during the day, or will it be a special day or it's just like that Boeing 747 will just taxi like the rest of the?
Yeah, it's really important, and that's one of our unique features. We working with Virgin Galactic. I know you when you work with something really closely, you should realise these things a lot earlier. You don't always do that. So we realised that actually Newquay were the first place ever you would have launch and scheduled passenger services fully integrated. So it will be the first spaceport. There's one or two in the US proposing it, but they haven't got an operator yet. I think at Ellington Airport is looking at that in the US. But all the other spaceports are either bespoke or non-operational. So what we call general aviation. So Mojave Air and Spaceport is probably the most successful spaceport on the planet, full stop. It's got 2 or 3 operators out of there. And they're actually doing some launch at the moment.
Yeah.
But that's a general aviation airport. There's no civilian airliners going in and out. So Newquay will be the first place you can go into the terminal, one day fly to space, and next day perhaps fly to London on our end. So and we believe we'll be the first airport on the planet to do that.
Yeah.
So again, one of those stats proved me wrong with that one.
Yeah.
But we think we're dead on there. So that's quite interesting. Integrating launch and passengers. It's quite an interesting thing, but we think it's very doable and we can do it.
Will you be the first Virgin Orbit launch? Or will there be a couple of American?
That'll happen in the US. There is no doubt about that. I think they're looking at some carrier tests later in the year. They've just got their FAA license to do that. So we certainly won't be the first. We're hopefully the first outside of the US, we hope. And we think we're pretty much on course to do that. So we're the first step out of the US for Virgin Orbit to do their first launch away from US soil. Of course, they don't really do the launch from US soil. It's all from all over sea. We're pretty excited about all that sort of stuff. It's good.
So on a confidence level for 2020, any time in 2020, where are you at with your confidence for a launch as a percentage?
There's a lot in there to go potentially wrong. I'll call it in those terms. And the biggest question for me is regulation. Yeah. I mean, I think with an airport that can operate a Boeing 747 with a few tweaks, that's all doable. We need some help from government in terms of things like export controls and licensing. That's a sort of one of the bigger risks. But we need regulation. If we can't operate that system legally and safely in the UK, and the regulator is happy with that, and the regulator is DFT, and we're really hopeful the team in DFT who are really good at this sort of stuff and have progressed the space engineering bill really quickly. that is my big risk. That's not in my control. When you're managing risks, you want them to be in your control. We have an operator license also to sort out, and we need to sort out how the launch range is going to work as well. So there's some quite 60-40 in favour positive that we can achieve that. I'm not going to say 100% because I think that would be underestimating the risks involved with that. But there's no reason why we can't do that. If there's a will in the UK to do it, why wouldn't we? And I wish my fellow colleagues in Scotland the best as well, because I think they've got whether they can do it as quickly as we can. We think the first launch is really important for our point of view to get that licence in place. They've got a different trajectory. They've got a different type of project working in much deeper partnership with Lockheed Martin. Well, horizontal is different. You are more of an airport where airlines turn up or space lines turn up to you in a way. Or vertical launch, you've probably got a dedicated launch pad and you've got the dedicated systems and launching systems. So, 60-40. Is that too negative? I don't know.
No, 60-40 sounds slightly. I was hoping you'd go 70-30, but 60-40 I'll take.
I 100% think we can do it in a period. I mean, I think all this is absolutely doable, depending on the commerciality of it.
So it goes up dramatically to 21, 22 and all.
But to 2021, we always plan 2021 as the first launch, and we're planning 3 launches in 2021. I'm pretty 100% certain we can do that.
Right.
So pretty.
Oh, okay. So the 2021 will just be the icing on the cake, but that's a 60-40.
And the 60-40 is better, and the 40% negative is a 2-inch for me. Is about the technology export issues from the US that needs to be. It's a time issue probably, and the other issue about regulation, and that's normally critical on the UK government. We're pretty dependent about some twin tracking being done. So when the regulation is going through Parliament, can we have an early licence application? Can we have a temporary licence to operate the system and the spaceport just for one launch?
Yeah.
Can we have a one launch ticket, for example? Yeah. I don't know.
Right.
Those things will be discussed.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple of times manned space flight. Is the Virgin Galactic thinking of going out of Newquay, or is it, or is that something that's too far down the line?
We're part of the Virgin family, so we are still having discussions with Galactic alongside Virgin Orbit. We started predominantly our discussions about Virgin Galactic, so we know the system really well. There are some challenges to doing human space in the UK. Going back to that regulation issue, give it time. We've got the regulation pushed through Parliament through next year. We'll know where we stand, what we have to do to operate that system, and particularly protect the interests of the people on it, the passengers or the people taking the experience. It's also quite a costly system to manufacture with those risks in place. So that cost is fine commercially if you know you can operate. But am I going to press the button today on building a brand new human space station in the UK without any knowledge of the regulation in place to be able to do that? Probably not. So what I think you need to do, and that's why the Virgin Orbit is more comfortable, because we're bringing the US aircraft to us initially, so we don't have to buy an aircraft and modify it, which is quite a big thing to do. Let's get the regulation through next year. Look at how that affects us in our operations, what type of aircraft we may need to build in the UK, and then let's look at human space that comes to the UK. But we're one of our big things is we think the UK should have a very ambitious view on human spaceflight. I think we can only do that horizontally. I don't think we're going to have a vertical launch site that can do human spaceflight. I don't think that's on the proposition for Scotland either. Yeah. So we're going to do it. We're going to do it out of Newquay. So let's not lose that ambition. So we will pick up those discussions. We're going to concentrate on getting that first launch from orbit, but we're going to keep those discussions going with human spaceflight. And there are other players as well we're talking to who are considering UK for human spaceflight programs. Different technologies, but they see Newquay is the best place to do that. I mean, I think you know Newquay quite well. I mean, we never really talk about weather and tourism infrastructure very often because it's a given. Yeah, we have got the best tourism infrastructure in the UK. I might get shot for that, but in terms of the serving of the human spaceflight person, in terms of the restaurants, the hotels, and some of the houses that we got that can accommodate these people. We've got the best infrastructure in terms of that. We've got some great 4 or 5-star hotels. We've got some great personal residences people can rent, private concierge. We haven't looked at that quite a lot of detail. What's the package we can put round a 4 or 5 day human spaceflight experience? And Cornwall's got it got it in spades. So we know we can do that really, really easily. Our weather's also some of the best in the UK. But relatively, again, we don't talk about weather much because, frankly, we're in the UK and we're definitely not the same weather as New Mexico.
Yeah.
So
it's better. I mean, New Mexico is presumably just oppressive heat.
It's similar every day, broadly. So we sort of things when we started Spaceport, we looked at those things like, well, are we the best weather in the UK? Proportionate, we've got the same sort of weather to Glasgow or Northern Scotland, but it's certainly a bit better here generally. So we don't tend to talk about that, but that sort of all those things more likely come into human spaceflight dynamic really than satellite launch. And with satellite launch in Cornwall, if it's cloudy, not the cloud effect, but if it's bad weather today, it's probably not going to be bad weather tomorrow. So you're not going to move that system. You're not going to move that system between here and Scotland to do a launch because you just wait until the next day because it will be better tomorrow probably. Yeah. So our weather's pretty good. The frequency of launches are not much because we're not looking at 60 or 70 a year. One day maybe, but in the early years, a dozen maybe. So
but a dozen's quite a lot of launches. Yeah,
in the UK, what we're looking at. So if Lockheed do say what they're going to do, and Orbex and ourselves, she's all talking about perhaps 20 or 30 launches from the UK a year. That's quite a lot. Yeah. From a zero start.
Yeah, I mean, that was one really interesting thing that Alan Bond said on one of our podcasts was that one of the pluses of abandoning our space program is that we've got a clean slate to work from, and that allows we haven't got any players to pander to and anything like that. Is that something that you've actually found quite easy in your position? Presumably that's quite good because you're just starting from a standing start.
Yeah, no, yes, it is. It's possible, but there are some challenges in there as well. So you need to people to recognise the opportunity that sits there in the supply chain. A lot of people do, and I think some of the challenge in the marketplace is a lot of people that have geared up to launch and be able to engage with the launch providers, and it has taken a little bit longer than we'd all expected to get where we are today. So there is an issue there, but no, the opportunity for UK is massive. Rarely in economic development you get that big gap that you can easily fill. I mean, a lot of people are concerned about the stage of the technology development in the US. So looking at Virgin Orbit, perhaps I might sit in a meeting room in this building at Newquay Hall and say, well, it's not operational, commercial yet. No, it's not. But that's the exciting thing because we can capture all the supply chain gap. If you wait till it gets commercialised and then bring it in when it's lower risk, we're not going to have the opportunity, are you? Others would have taken that gap. So that's to beyond the first stage of where the technology is not in. It's still in R&D, still in proof of concept. That's when you need to get involved, and then you can get all the economic benefit. Other industries have told you, like wind power. You need to be there at the start of that journey, not jump along halfway along. So hopefully Cornwall and Cornwall Council and others have been brave to say, no, we're going to have a go at this. We'll be ambitious. We're going to go in, really early and capture it.
Thank you very much for spending the time and talking to us.
No, it's always a pleasure. It's really exciting times for us. So
it's hugely exciting. When it was first announced that it was Virgin Orbit, it was like,
there we go. Very exciting. That
awesome stuff.
That we might be able to go and see a space launch from Britain in the next couple of years. How cool is that?
That is just going to be the best time. I mean, Matt, can you imagine our little faces at a British launch?
I know. Ridiculous. Hey, Jamie, do you know what I found out today?
What?
My local newspaper came through the door yesterday, and Helen Sharman...
Daily Star?
No, it's called The Good Life. I suppose in the fact that... it's actually called The Good Life. Because, of course, The Good Life was set in Surbiton. And do you know who used to live in Surbiton when she flew to space?
Who?
Helen Sharman.
What?
We need to get Helen on the show.
It has to happen. It's fate, Matt. It's fate.
It does. We need to start with the last person in space and finish with the first person in space from Britain. We have to do that. We got to do that. Do you want to hear my space fact? I rushed this one, but I know that you like it.
I don't care that you rushed it, Matt, because you know I'm excited about this. It's a word that has filled my science fiction for a long time. I even bought a book on it, Matt. Do you remember that time?
What, you bought a book on panspermia?
Yeah, big time.
Wow.
I bought a book on it, and then after a while, I sort of hid that book because I was worried that I wouldn't meet a girl.
Good for you.
And have relations.
Yeah, well, yeah,
But hey, Matt,
yeah.
let's not talk about that. Let's have Space Fact of the Week.
Yes, so a paper has just come out by Aiden Ginsberg, Manasvi Lingam, and Abraham Loeb from the Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts, from the Institute of Theory and Computation, about galactic panspermia. Oof. Now, I mean, people have been talking about, first of all, that within our own solar system, that if you had, rocks being flung up into the air from Mars over to Earth, then maybe it could carry bacteria and viruses and things like that over. And, I think that's totally feasible. But then they were saying, obviously, we had Robert Zubrin on talking about how it could go from star system to star system.
Yeah.
Now, these guys have worked out that you could have galactic panspermia.
Jeez.
And it's all to do with the velocities that you can get. Remember last week or the week before, we talked about Gaia discovering stars that had been flung out of their galaxies and were sort of galaxial interlopers.
Yes.
Well, why not other objects? Like you could have, like, say the whole of Enceladus was somehow flung out of the solar system, made its way to the center of the galaxy, where the supermassive black hole at the center of the galaxy, the tidal forces managed to fling the whole of Enceladus out of the galaxy towards another galaxy, carrying all the life and bacteria with it to seed another galaxy.
Matt, how rare is it that you would get rocks and matter from other galaxies entering into another galaxy?
Well, we just don't know. Actually, I think it's really, really hard to work out, but it certainly seems feasible, doesn't it? You certainly get we've seen Oumuamua is a rock from another solar system, and that's obviously being caused by it being ejected via a star. But to be ejected by a supermassive black hole would obviously mean that you could get to these kind of speeds that would allow you to travel from galaxy to galaxy. So I don't see why not you could get large or even small objects flung out of the galaxy towards other galaxies. And if that Gaia paper turns out to be right,
nothing could leave a black hole once it was in it.
No, you can. Once you're past the event horizon, absolutely correct. But you can certainly head towards a black hole. And just like comets that come into the solar system, a comet can fly around the sun and be flung out, never to be seen again. But it can come in and then be trapped by the sun's gravitational well and be trapped in orbit, like a lot of comets are trapped in orbit, periodical comets. Or you can have a comet that comes in and crashes directly into the sun or is ripped apart by its tidal forces. But most objects falling towards a black hole won't actually fall directly in it unless that was their path. They would be either captured into orbit or flung out at vast speeds, at very, very great speeds, particularly a supermassive black hole, because you would have been flung towards it at incredible velocities. Matt, so that's how it works.
It's very early in the day to have my head explode, but it's exploding.
Yeah. So how cool is that?
Super cool. I love it. I'd like to big up panspermia. Just saying.
You're bigging up panspermia. I'm always slightly cautious with panspermia. It's one of those things that falls very close to the edge of pseudoscience. But
Matt, just throw away your caution and come and dive in.
I can't throw away caution.
The water's beautiful.
You must always follow the truth, no matter where it leads, Jamie. No matter where it leads. If the truth is that panspermia doesn't exist, then I'm happy with that.
I'm happy with that too. But Matt, talking of the truth, I'd like to say a big thank you to our Patreons
And our listeners.
And our listeners. Imagine listening to us, Matt. Imagine listening to us every week. Mm-hmm. That's hard work, isn't it?
Particularly this week.
I mean, they deserve a medal.
And they shall have their medal.
Sounds like something from Lord of the Rings.
They shall be cast into the pit of Mordor.
Which is ironic, because Matt does look a little bit like Treebeard.
And you look a little bit like...
I'm a little bit Hobbit, aren't I?
You are part Hobbit. You are definitely a direct descendant from Hobbit Man.
Yeah, my sisters used to say I had Hobbit feet because they're quite hairy, which is very cruel, Matt. It's very mean, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's what sisters are for, to be mean.
Yeah, that's true. That's true enough.
My sister's going to be 50 this weekend. How about that?
Oh, happy birthday. What's your sister's name?
Claire.
Happy birthday, Claire.
She gets a birthday shout out on the podcast.
She does. I'm sure she's a listener.
And my best mate Jay as well. It's his birthday this week as well.
I know Jay, and he is ace. Happy birthday, Jay. So, Matt, if I've enjoyed this podcast and I'm not a host, what should I do about it?
Well, even if you are a host, Jamie, you could still do the same thing. But you could go to www.interplanetary.org.uk.
Planetary.org.uk. Okay, yeah, written that down. Next.
Preferably go to iTunes and subscribe. Yeah. And if you do subscribe, please write us a nice 5-star review, and that would be absolutely amazing.
5-star review, yeah. Yeah.
I really want to do a shout out to our new Skylon patron, Kaylee.
Kaylee,
you are a legend.
Kaylee, you know what? Wherever you are right now, give yourself a little pat on the back, and I'd like you to go to a shop. Get yourself a little treat. It could be a donut, could be a nice crisp apple. I don't mind, but I want you to look after yourself today because you've earned it. And
do you know what you get as a Skylon? Not only do you get your interplanetary T-shirt of your choice, you also get the mug. You get which I think is the best bit of merch.
It is the thing when people come round to my flat, they're not worried about my original Bowie records. They're just jealous of my interplanetary podcast mug.
Someone lost my one at work. I mean, I don't know who nicked it, but whoever did can give it me back.
You've literally been mugged off.
I have. Jamie, we should really let the listeners go. Let's wrap them up. Matt. You have been listening to the Interplanetary Podcast, putting the ace back into space.
To space. What advice do you have to people this weekend? Some life advice, just one sentence. That's all we need.
Go watch First Man. I haven't seen it yet. Neither has Jamie, and we're going to watch it. And we'll all discuss it next week on the podcast.
That's great advice.
What about you, Jamie? Advice?
Don't take life so seriously. Try not to let work stress you out. Because, Matt, we're just on this little tiny speck of dust in this tiny spiral galaxy. So just go out, get some chocolate, dip it in a glass of Guinness, and enjoy yourself.
And imagine that some bacteria that you've just breathed out could somehow be floated up into the upper atmosphere, get covered in soot, and blown across the interstellar winds, and to be picked up by a passing star to eventually be flung out into the rest of intergalactic space to seed the entire universe.
I'd like to say goodbye to everyone. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye, Spodcats. Love you loads.
See you.
Bye-bye.